Maria Casco, welcome to the Liberated podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's really a great opportunity to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I want to hear more about your story. How did you come into the world of education and schooling alternatives and all of these exciting trends that we're seeing right now? What is your kind of backstory for that?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think I was kind of born into it. And as much as I tried to fight it for a long time, I ended up right back on the path of education. So my mother was a Montessori teacher. So I come from the Montessori background, and I grew up around education. I ended up back getting my master's in education, getting my diploma in Montessori, and teaching at a great Montessori school. And, I loved it. Being around children has always been something that just lights my heart on fire. I love seeing the world through their eyes. I love watching and being a part of those discoveries. I know that only happened during childhood. So I was always really called to it, and I love connecting with children. So I love teaching. Teaching was what I loved to do. However, I started to feel a little bit trapped. I suddenly realized, like, I wanted to be making more of an impact in more children's lives. And even though I was giving it my all in my small classroom, I very quickly realized, oh gosh, I don't think I can do this for 20 years. It was year 3, and I was already kind of like pacing, thinking to myself, like, this can't be it. There's got to be more. So during the pandemic, an incredible opportunity came up, and a family offered up a space, and it kind of, all of the right things had to happen for us to kind of, create this educational collaborative now that we have. And it took a lot of trust and a lot of big risks. Personally, it was scary to leave my job. It was scary to do something I'd never done before. But suddenly, as we created what started out as a COVID pod, we were like, oh wait, this is actually the door to something so much greater. And we started doing so much research. So Jenna, who's my co-teacher, and she's the co-founder too of CASCO. So we kind of started going into it, and the more we saw and heard and read about, the more we loved. And even though for a while we thought we would go back and kind of go through the whole route of getting the private school Montessori certification, the same kind of world we had come from, we actually said, oh wait, we actually feel liberated. So not only liberated as learners, but liberated as educators, to be, stepping into this other world that has been out there, but it was unknown to us. And it started resonating with our families. We started sharing everything with our families, and the more we shared, I think the more that they also kind of saw the benefits of all of the things that we were doing. And slowly but surely now we're growing with it. We're year 3, and we've been able to gather more families, and people are finding us now for the reasons that we believe in.
Amazing. This is such a classic story of education transformation over the past couple of years where, you had been a teacher, maybe looking for something different, had this idea that maybe there was more to learning than what you were experiencing in the classroom, but not quite sure where to go or how to get there. And then, of course, COVID shakes up society broadly, and especially education, and provided that entry point for you to create a pod and start to work on a more collaborative alternative learning model that then, like other stories that I've showcased here on the podcast, have turned into kind of full-fledged, in your case, learning collaborative. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about what CASCO Learning is now, how it really did evolve from just a small pod, kind of spontaneous group of learners to now a much more established program. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's funny because hearing you ask that too, I sometimes joke that this kind of happened by accident, that suddenly we have everything that we've created. It was just the next best thing that was, in front of us, and we just had to reach out and take it. So CASCO is, so it's a collaborative, only reason being it's not just the learning center, which obviously is where most of our time is at the moment, but we from the beginning felt very strongly. So travel is something that we love to do. We actually, Jenna and I both say that we're educators at heart, but world travelers by trade. And we actually know that the best teaching that we do comes from the more traveling that we do, in our personal life. So it became very apparent that we wanted to mix that into the collaborative. So family travel was a huge sector of, the organization that we were trying to build, even though it was a tiny, tiny little community. From the beginning, we said, we feel strongly that this, that this become a part of it. So we put a trip expedition to Mexico together in 2021. And I was kind of crossing my fingers that I would be happy with 6 families, or 6 people, sorry. I was like, if I get 6 people to come on this trip with me, I will have deemed this a success. And then we actually had upwards of 40 and we almost didn't fit on the bus, and we had an incredible time. And it was just that element of traveling as a community as well. So obviously we're not reinventing the wheel by any means, by any of the things that we're doing, but we are kind of piecing together all of the values that are important to us as families that now, make up this collaborative. So that travel component is also something that speaks a lot to us. And the Spanish, so we do a lot of Spanish immersion too, within the learning center. And so that also just goes hand in hand, because then the Spanish becomes, we're traveling to Spanish speaking countries. So we're doing Costa Rica this year. We did Mexico last year. So that just, complements the program, the travel program really well. And then the parent coaching is the other part of that. So learning is not just for the children, learning is for everyone. And so we also feel very strongly that we connect with the parents, and that we're always, educating ourselves too on conscious parenting and all of the different practices that are out there, and how that, again, just benefits the child and the family so well. So those are the three sectors: learning center, the parent coaching, and the travel. And they, come together really beautifully in this model that is a unique concept. And here in St. Louis, the concept of collaborative schooling is fairly new. And it's been exciting to connect with other similar models around the country too, because, like you mentioned, the COVID accelerated some of that too. And the evolution of education, I think, is happening right there, in front of us. And it's been a wild ride.
Well, how courageous of you to launch this vision in the midst of the COVID pandemic and have a travel component in 2021 to Mexico with 40 other travelers. I mean, that's just extraordinary. Kudos to you for that success. And I imagine now it'll be sort of smooth sailing as the world opens up more, that hopefully
if we could do it back then, I think, definitely the irony is not lost on me. A couple of my friends, I would, when I was in 2020, I was like, well, I'm opening this world school. They're like, wait, so it's a pandemic and you're opening a travel school? Back then we didn't really know what to call it. And we were kind of just grasping at whatever, resonated. So I was like, yep, one day this will make sense. And yeah, it definitely has. So it's
amazing. So Costa Rica, I imagine, will attract even more travelers to go along with you.
Yeah, so, we're going into the rainforest.
So how does it work, Maria, with the Learning Center and the Travel Collaborative? Are they the same families, different families? Is there overlap? How many students are you serving through the Learning Center itself, and then in addition to these other kinds of resources?
Yeah, so right now at the Learning Center, we have 35 enrolled learners. So we started with 12. That was our COVID pod. So we have 35 learners. However, not all of the families that are enrolled in the Learning Center are part of the collaborative. So we also, our membership to the collaborative extends beyond that. So that kind of opens the door to families in the area who are interested, and either their children are not old enough to enroll yet, or they're full-time homeschooling, and that works for them, but they're seeking that connection with a little bit more community, perhaps some different opportunities available to them. So that's worked really well. We're growing that portion of CASCO this year in particular. So we call that Friends of CASCO. So all of the families together come together, make up the collaborative, but there's flexibility and how much or how little you are involved and participate with, whatever works for each family.
And with the Learning Center, the families that are there, they are registered or identified as homeschoolers. Do they have kind of flexible options? What does the week look like in terms of families' involvement there?
Yeah, so we call it flexible schooling. It's, we do have the full-time options, but we have part-time options as well. So it really just depends on the families. We advise that it's like 2 days a week would be the minimum. One day a week, it just starts becoming, for the children, a little unpredictable. But the 2 or 3 days and 4 days a week, it works really well. And, the group changes every day. It's a dynamic group. They're excited to see each other. It's also, as an educator, it makes it really exciting because you are seeing new faces, and, your group within, appropriate measures changes, and we're able to, connect with more people and more learners, and they're happy. They love coming in. It's always a good thing when they don't want to leave, and they're excited to come back. So that's when school is done right. So whatever school as the term that we know it means. Yeah, it works.
I love that you have that part-time flexibility as well as the full-time option to be a true schooling alternative for families who want that 5-day-a-week version. And, one of the things you said earlier was that it's helpful to not think of traditional models of schooling. When you discovered that you had this alternative, kind of this collaborative learning space, as you call it, or collaborative schooling, this sort of microschool model is really opening up so many more possibilities for education, for educators like you, as well as for the families that you serve. What is appealing about this sort of alternative model of learning that isn't captured so well by traditional schooling? I guess, in other words, what limitations would you have encountered if you had gone kind of the traditional private school route as opposed to this schooling collaborative?
Yeah, I mean, I think that right there is the reason why we decided to even just run with this model, because from the educator's perspective, it's suffocating. I mean, we're seeing it right now, what's happening to all of the teachers who are coming in with passion and so much eagerness to do right by, all of these children. But very quickly, you're either taking advantage of when you have a lot to give, or your passion is just snuffed right out. So from the educator's perspective, it also became a little bit like flexible teaching. So that's something that both Jenna and myself resonated with deeply. For us to be able to give everything that we have to the children, there has to be this idea that, that there are breaks. So we have this year-round calendar now too, that it just makes more sense for everyone, not just the families, it's the educators as well. And then for the families, again, I mean, it just comes back down to even just the simple concept of being ticked, against you for attendance. When I have a family that is wanting to take a 2-week trip to Hawaii to go visit volcanoes, who am I to say, no, the child must stay here every day? Where it's actually, again, learning happens everywhere, right? So the concept is this flexible schooling with the right values in mind. So, and this is not going to be for everyone, and just, traditional schooling works for a lot of people too, and that's okay. We just suddenly discovered that with the families that we're building this collaborative with, we were designing it with these families and for these families, because it's what made sense. It's what they wanted to see for their own children. And it's this concept of spending time with their children. Again, I say during COVID, a lot of families discovered that, whoa, this is something like education can be more. I enjoy spending time with my child, and maybe not all the time every day, but I actually want to see more of them and be more involved in their education and have a part in that journey. So then again, we offer that flexibility to say, yes, I mean, we have parents who are working in our space, who are coming in to give lessons. That concept of collaborative schooling really can give you so much flexibility too with how you want it to look, right? So if a family is wanting to come in and give a 15-week philosophy course, done. If they're wanting to just come in and lead an art project ever so often, or come in and give a lesson ever so often, that's also fine too. So there's just, each family has so much agency in that. And I think the result is that we're seeing the children have so much ownership over their own education. And one of the biggest things that I noticed, observed, and continue to stand by is that, especially as these children are getting older, they're understanding their education so much differently, on such a different level. And it made it so apparent why education should be happening with them and not just to them. They cannot just be put on a conveyor belt that runs them through. It should be a conversation. I mean, they are the ones who are, at the end of the day, at the helm of their education. So they should have a voice in that. And not only is that going to result in a more productive and happier learning environment for them, but over time, you're teaching them these skills that are going to be completely valuable once they, wherever their path might take them, that you can't really capture that in the traditional schooling, I don't think, because so much of it is just state mandated curriculum based for the entire class. And again, I say there's benefits to that for some people. For some people, but it's definitely not for everyone. And it's those families that also were, courageous enough to say, oh, wait, it can be more. And I want to be a part of building that.
Education is so much more than schooling. And it's wonderful that you're being able to show that and to grant that to more families. And I imagine, though, that it creates its own challenges, right? Because we have these kind of compulsory school attendance laws and regulatory boxes that really only know education as synonymous with schooling. And so when we get outside of that, okay, well, there's homeschooling, thankfully, that is, of course, legal in all 50 states and is able to be practiced by families in all kinds of different ways. But one of the things that you've said is that you're not really homeschooling or unschooling. You're a schooling collaborative. You're an entirely different category, a whole new box that doesn't fit into kind of neat regulatory silos. And I imagine that may create some challenges for you as an education entrepreneur, kind of charting this new territory. So not only sort of dealing with where you fit in from a regulatory perspective, but also where you fit in terms of communicating with and marketing to families about what you are. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, I think that's the component where I would say that's where the wild ride comes from. It has been isolating at many times. It's definitely been a hurdle. The biggest thing was that we wanted to make sure that we had our bases covered and that everything that we were doing was obviously the right thing to do. And so that has been, I think, the biggest, because there's not many other models out there like this, and you can't really just say, well, how did they do that? Or how did they, figure that out? And like you mentioned, we very quickly discovered there's kind of only two boxes that you can fit into. And we kind of found that we didn't quite fit into either. And so that is where we decided, all right, well, this collaborative schooling will be our term. And it kind of looks like traditional schooling at times, and it kind of looks like homeschooling at times too, but they come together and meet in the middle in this amazing, new model that works for a lot of families. Because again, I say, depending on the family values and what's important to them, they can make it be their own thing. And like you mentioned, I mean, we have to pay attention to all of those different guidelines and things that that differ state by state, but we had to pay very close attention to that as well, and work a lot with people in our community to to make sure that we could move forward. And I think we have hit our stride finally, and the more we are learning, the easier it is becoming to navigate those waters. But absolutely, that initial time, it was terrifying, because it actually seems like the system is stacked against you. And even though we were trying to create this incredible thing that was benefiting all of these families, it was impossible. It felt many times.
So what would make it easier for you, Maria, or what would have made it easier for you? Would it be expanding the definition of education to be much broader and much further than just schooling? Is there a policy angle that could help education entrepreneurs like you who are creating these innovative K-12 learning models and schooling alternatives? Because you're right, you're not fitting into schooling or homeschooling. Again, you're this entirely new category. So what could be beneficial?
Yes. So we've often joked that we need to march down and speak to the policymakers themselves. However, there's not enough hours in the day. I think it's the biggest benefit, I think, and it took a long time. It took 2 years for us to get there, even to find other models out there, is a network. I think the networking and the sense of community, when you do connect with people who are doing either something similar or something, adjacent, it helps a lot, because suddenly you realize, oh, right, you remember why you're doing this. You remember you're not really alone. It kind of gives you inspiration to continue even through some of those hurdles that seem very daunting. So the concept of creating, a collaborative learning network is something that we have on our pipeline of the 1,000 things we plan on doing, because that, I think that's right there what would help even from, if you look at where I started as an educator with just all of this zest and passion, and just I didn't know where to put it. And if somebody had presented this opportunity to me already tied in a neat package, explaining everything that it would come with, oh my gosh, I mean, that would have right there been, a change, a huge change that would have benefited, 2 years ago, where I was. And I think that could probably be the same for a lot of educators. We've heard from a lot of educators who have found us, who are, how did you do that? Or how did you get started? And, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're already in year 3. And so you do realize there's a lot of people out there like that. And there just isn't enough to show, yes, this is something that can, that can be right for you as well, if you feel so inclined. So I think that community, I mean, again, I say it's just, that's part of how we even build this collaborative model. It works within the collaboration within our community, but we're eager to collaborate with models and schools and unschool, anything around the whole country. Because again, I say that concept of collaboration, it just makes us stronger. I think often we found that in traditional schooling, it's so competitive that even the schools amongst themselves are just constantly trying to beat each other out. And that even just from it becomes a little bit of a toxic culture to enter in as an educator. So it made us kind of want to stay far, far away from that, because I think that's what leads a little bit to the pressure and from the school administrators, and a little bit of that suffocation that I was referring to. So the concept of collaborating instead just seems, it makes more sense, at least to me.
So maybe while you're waiting for that right moment to go talk to those Missouri lawmakers to think about maybe some more deregulatory steps to make it easier for education entrepreneurs like you to start and scale an innovative learning model, you can rely on this community, right? And I think that's such a good message to education entrepreneurs who are listening, particularly those maybe in the early stages or thinking about launching their own program, is connecting with others who are doing this or who have done this can make it so much easier. I love your idea of a toolkit, kind of how to get going, and some of the roadblocks that you might encounter, and then building up that network of support, because it is a difficult task. It's obviously difficult for entrepreneurs in any sector, but especially for education entrepreneurs who are really thinking and building outside of the box. And that may go back to kind of your earlier point. I mean, you were already working in the Montessori model, which is this sort of beautiful child-centered sort of alternative education approach. And yet you decided that you wanted something even more, right? Even more child-centered, even more self-directed, even more customizable. And I wonder if you can maybe explain that or explore that a little bit more. I already think of Montessori as being so free and so flexible. What is it about this sort of new model that you've created that takes that to a whole new level?
Yeah, for sure. I think, we're at our core Montessorians, although we like to refer to ourselves as rebel Montessorians, because Montessori, she was brilliant, and there's so many things that make so much sense. But with the world of certifications and again, proving that you have the best Montessori environment, also comes that element of competitiveness that puts other models down. And so that's something that I had a big issue with, was if something made sense for the child, even though it was outside of the Montessori model, I just could not understand why we wouldn't attempt that approach, just because it wasn't listed as part of the Montessori model. And so that's what immediately led us to say, well, we're Montessori at our core, and even our learning environment looks exactly like a Montessori classroom would, but we were taking from the best of all the models, because suddenly it's like, yeah, why would we just do it this way when we can do it many different ways that make sense for the child? And again, at the center of all of this is the child, and it's our observation of what they need and where they are, and the connection with the family, and working together in collaboration with these families to benefit and empower these children, and raise good people and good humans, and intelligent humans who are asking questions, and not just taking everything they hear for granted. And I mean, you see that spark. Oh my gosh, you see that spark every day. And the more that they're around that, it's just the less that you can put them into a box too. The box that, that sometimes traditional school wants them to fit into so neatly and tidy. And again, I think everybody's path in education leads to many, many different roads, but that agency and that intellectual vitality, which for me is number one objective, is to be able to understand their world, the world around them, and their role in the world. That's just going to come from a plethora of models. You can't just take that from one thing alone. And it's not just the models either, it's the people and the environment. So that's why the collaborative component is also so important, because as much as Jen and I are out there giving it our all, we are not everything either. And so we're collaborating with so many of these parents, and we're reaching out to educators and other administrators from around the country, and we're just learning, because again, even as adults, we are still self-directed learners, and that doesn't stop. And so the more that we can do that and model that for the children, then the more that they will do that and then encompass, and embody that in their own lives. So
I really appreciate that openness to tailoring your educational setting to the individual child, and using various types of educational approaches in order to do that. I mean, I think it's great that you have Montessori as kind of your bedrock principle and outlook in terms of how children should be educated, but also being willing to bring in all of these other kinds of models or tools and resources and ideas and perspectives to create a truly tailored learning environment that doesn't fit into any neat boxes. So you have this learning center, again, with part-time and full-time options for families in the St. Louis area. You have your successful travel program that seems well positioned to take off with your upcoming trip to Costa Rica this year. And then you mentioned that you have this parent support and parent coaching. Can you tell us, Maria, a little bit more about that? What do you find are some of the challenges today for families, and how do you help them through those?
Yeah, I think that, the biggest objective with that too, and I think I mentioned this before, it's just that learning isn't just for the children, right? And especially in particular to this type of model that we are incorporating, and this kind of now what feels like a lifestyle, right? That we are all choosing this together, when it could very easily just go back to what it was before. It requires a lot of community. So in the same way that we're seeking community as educators with our model, I think a lot of these parents are just seeking community, as parents, in their everyday parenting, and just that concept of not feeling so alone. And whether it's parenting from, what to do when the tantrum, happens, or, how to choose your schooling options for your child, and everything in between, that sense of community and that sense of, it's obviously, it's a very overused saying, but it takes a village. Really, just it shows you how, when you're working together, and the more that you talk it out, the more that you are listening, having an open mind to everything that's out there, the more you are growing as a person, and therefore as a parent. So I always believed too that the more I knew the parents, the better I could understand their child. So that was always something that that made sense. And in Montessori, we stay with our classroom for several years, so it's not just like a one in, one out kind of system. And so you really get to know these people and these families, and I think that's beautiful, because again, when a lot of these children are spending most of their hours with these educators and in these learning communities, more so than with their families in some cases. And I think it's valuable for that person to, accept them as part of their own family and love them, because that, you're gonna root for them a lot more too, when that's the case. And so that collaboration, even between us as educators and the families, just results in a healthier and happier environment. So it's been working really well too. And we don't spend as much time as we would like on that, but both Jen and I feel strongly about that. That was something that from the beginning, we were like, put it on the website. We may not have anything to offer yet, but it'll be a part of it. It'll be one of our pillars because that's important.
So Maria, it's the fall of 2022. The pandemic phase of COVID seems to thankfully be over. The world is opening up. Schools are getting back to normal. Do you think this was just a fad? Sort of these pandemic pods that turned into homeschool collaboratives and microschools. Do you think that that will stay, or will that fade? That momentum, that energy, that excitement for these new learning models, will they fade, or will it be here for the long term, do you think?
I think you might see a little bit of both. I can see why you would just kind of go back to your normal, whatever that normal might have looked like. But there are so many of us, I think, who have seen too much of what it can be like to go back. We talk about that very often. Sometimes when we're in the midst of all that, we're like, we kind of wish we didn't know, but we're too far in. We're all in on this, and we're pushing forward because we're designing this, for our own families. And I don't have any children yet, but I'm creating the environment for which I want to educate my children, my own children. And if that continues to drive me and all of my families forward, then I know then it's not going anywhere, because this life is too short. Our children grow up too fast. And this is the moment in front of us that we have. So no way we're going back.
So what does CASCO Learning look like 5 years from now?
Oh, well, I sit and dream all day long. So this is a great question. We often talk about expanding within not just the St. Louis region to be able to, at the moment, we go through and offer 6th grade, but it would be lovely to open an adolescent environment. That would be something that would just make sense, and continuing with the families. I would love to create a residency program for educators where we can host educators from Spanish-speaking countries, ideally, and bring them into these collaboratives, so that kind of brings the Spanish immersion element to it. You're working and helping a lot of these educators kind of expand their sense of education and try out different experiences. And I would love to be traveling several times a year if I could. So the travel program would be well underway. Keep an eye out for Guide to Collaborative Learning, a little mini startup pocketbook, if you will. We just want to, to do our part in the world and help families and empower families and children. So the more that we can do, the better. It's just the time of the day,
Just exciting plans for you. I'm excited to see where it all goes. Maria, how can my listeners find and follow your work and connect with CASCO Learning?
Yeah, so our website, CASCOlearning.com. That's where it's going through a little bit of an update. We're doing a refresh of our marketing finally. So that's where you see a lot of it's, we're posting a lot of our parenting. We do a monthly parenting guide called The Helm. We created our own custom parenting tool that kind of goes around, and we speak to it a lot. So a lot of these conversations we're having on a monthly basis. That's something to stay connected with. Our Instagram is very active. And eventually, expanding that membership option is going to be something that is in the pipeline. But at the moment, we love to connect. We love to chat with educators out there who might be feeling like they need, someone to lean on and someone to kind of problem solve with. So we're all about that. There's a seat at the table for everyone. So reach out, email, all of our information is on our website there. Happy to connect.
Maria Casco, thank you again for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for all of your work and helping empower us out there. So I appreciate it.